Hi there, thank you for return to my channel. How good your day? Whatever your mood, please take a few minutes to join me. I hope today's story will help you relax, unwind, and find some peace after a long day. Now, let's begin.
My dad kicked down my bedroom door at 2:30 a.m., the wood splintering as the hinges gave way. He stormed in and yelled, "Pack your stuff and give up your room for your brother right now." My stepmom was right behind him, her voice ice cold as she added, "You have no choice anymore. My name is Skylar." I just lay there in the dark, heart slamming against my ribs, staring at the broken door hanging loose. That room was my only real sanctuary, the one place where my competitive cheerleading varsity medals lined the walls, reminders of every early morning practice, every regional win, every time I'd led the team to state. 8 months earlier, my dad had remarried my stepmom, and her son, 2 years younger than me, had moved in full-time. He'd always shoot these resentful glances at my medals whenever he passed my door, like they were rubbing his own lack of drive in his face. He'd been complaining about wanting the bigger room with the better light and closet for weeks, but I never imagined it would explode like this. That night, with the door destroyed, and both of them standing over me demanding I hand everything over, I had no idea they had already put a much bigger plan in motion behind my back, one that would change everything. If you want to hear exactly what they were hiding, how it all came crashing out, and how I handled it, hit that like button and subscribe right now, so you don't miss a single part of what happened next. Right after the door crashed open, my dad charged into the room, his face flushed, and his breathing coming in short, angry bursts. My stepmom followed right on his heels, her expression hard and determined as she stopped just inside the threshold. He jabbed a finger toward me and shouted, "Get up and start packing your things. You're out of this room tonight. Your brother needs the space, and he's taking it starting now." I pushed myself up against the headboard, rubbing my eyes to clear the sleep fog, and managed to ask, "What are you talking about? Why all of this right now?" Dad paused for a beat, glancing back at my stepmom before answering vaguely. "It's time for some changes in the house. Things need to shift so everyone can be more comfortable." He started pacing along the side of my bed, his heavy steps making the floor creak. My stepmom stayed by the broken door, arms folded tightly, staring me down like she was daring me to push back. I asked again, trying to keep my voice steady, wanting to know exactly why this had to happen in the dead of night. That's when she moved closer and said in a low, cutting tone, "If you make this difficult, it's only going to end up worse for you. Just accept it and cooperate." The threat hung in the air, making the room feel smaller. I pulled my knees up under the covers, staying silent to buy time and think. Dad kept going, explaining that since the family was finally all under one roof, adjustments were necessary. He talked about how the bigger room with its large window and walk-in closet would give my stepbrother the motivation he needed to get his life together. He brought up Knox's struggles adjusting, how the smaller room down the hall was holding him back, making him feel boxed in and unproductive. I nodded occasionally to keep him talking, not interrupting, while my mind raced through what this really meant. Dad's frustration built the longer I stayed quiet, and that's when he finally snapped and let the bigger picture slip. "We've already looked into better options for you," he said, stopping his pacing to look at me directly. "There's this boarding school in another state, one of the top programs for competitive cheer athletes. It'll take your skills to the next level, give you the kind of intense training you won't get staying here." The phrase boarding school landed hard. I didn't react outwardly, but my hand slid slowly under the pillow to grab my phone. I unlocked the screen, with my thumb opened the voice recorder app, and pressed start, without pulling the device out, all while keeping my expression neutral. Once the recording was running, Dad opened up completely. He described the academy they'd chosen, a prestigious facility known for producing national champions with full-time coaches, dedicated gyms, and a structured schedule designed for serious athletes. They'd submitted the application months ago and paid a $15,000 non-refundable deposit in early fall, right around the time I'd brought home another set of regional medals. The idea, he said, was to enroll me for the spring term, moving me into on-campus housing so I could focus entirely on cheer without the distractions of home life. My stepmom chimed in, then saying this arrangement would benefit the whole family. With me gone, Knox could finally have the space he deserved, the room where he could set up his gaming consoles properly, invite friends over without squeezing into a tiny area, and feel like he actually belonged in the house. She stressed how my constant successes were weighing on him, how coming home to see new trophies and team photos every few weeks made Knox feel like a failure by comparison. Removing that daily reminder, she argued, would let him breathe and find his own path without the pressure. Dad agreed, adding that they'd take care of the enrollment details soon. He casually mentioned my mom, Danielle, and how her living in another part of the state made coordination tricky, but they'd handle the required parental signatures when the final forms came through. It was said so matter-of-factly, like bypassing her approval was just a small hurdle. Throughout the conversation, I picked up on subtle noises from the hallway light, shuffling the occasional shift of weight against the wall. Knox was out there the entire time, eavesdropping on every word. Whenever his mom described how the bigger room would finally be his, or how my absence would lift his burden, I heard these soft, smug chuckles drifting in from the darkness. Dad wrapped up by insisting I begin sorting my clothes and cheer equipment immediately so the switch could happen smoothly by morning. My stepmom reinforced it, repeating that resistance would only prolong the inevitable and make things more unpleasant. They both stood there waiting for me to crumble or comply, but I gave them nothing, no tears, no pleas, no outburst. Instead, I just nodded faintly here and there, letting the recorder capture every admission, every justification, every veiled threat. When they finally backed off, Dad grumbling about dealing with the rest tomorrow, and my stepmom delivering one final pointed glare, they left the doorway. Around 4 a.m, when the house finally went completely silent again, I attached the entire audio file to a secure message and sent it straight to my mom. The note was short. "Mom, you need to hear this right now. It's urgent." The message showed delivered almost instantly. A few seconds later, the typing bubble appeared. Mom responded immediately. "Just listened. I'm on my way. Stay in your room and don't engage with them. I'll handle it." Seeing her words on the screen eased the knot in my chest a little, but sleep didn't come easy after that. I lay there listening to the occasional creak of the house settling the draft, whistling through the broken doorframe, waiting for whatever came next. Sunrise over Charlotte brought the sound of engines pulling into the driveway. I peeked through the curtains and saw Mom's familiar car stopping abruptly, followed closely by a sleek sedan I'd never seen before. Mom got out first, looking worn from no sleep. Her face set in that determined way I knew meant business. The woman accompanying her, tall, dressed in a sharp suit carrying a leather briefcase, moved with purpose as they headed to the front door. They hadn't even reached the steps when another knock echoed through the house, this one louder and more official. Dad shuffled downstairs in sweatpants and a t-shirt, opening the door to 2 uniformed officers. The older one held a clipboard. The younger one had a body camera running. The officers stated they'd responded to a neighbor's call reporting a loud disturbance, significant banging that rattled windows and walls, plus shouting that carried down the street. They noted previous complaints about raised voices from this address over the past months, but this incident sounded more intense, prompting an immediate welfare check. Dad tried to downplay it right away, calling it a private family matter that got heated, but was already resolved. The officers remained professional, asking permission to enter and assess the situation. Once inside, they headed straight to the hallway, spotting the damaged door immediately. The frame was splintered, the hinges bent, and small chunks of wood scattered on the carpet. The younger officer started taking photos with his department phone, close-ups of the break point, the force marks on the door itself, the hairline cracks radiating into the adjacent wall. The older one asked Dad point blank what caused the damage. Dad admitted to forcing the door open during an argument but insisted no one was hurt, and it was a one-time loss of temper. They separated us for statements. When they came to me, still in my room, sitting on the bed, I recounted the events calmly, the sudden entry at 2 a.m., the demand to vacate my room immediately, the escalating threats when I questioned it. I mentioned the discussion about major changes to my living situation without my input. The officers listened without interrupting, jotting notes, and adding more photos of the interior chaos, displaced furniture from the impact scuffs on the floor. Next, they spoke with my stepmom in the kitchen. She described it as an emotional disagreement over household rules, regrettable but not ongoing. Knox, when questioned in the living room, claimed he was asleep most of the time and only heard muffled noise, nothing specific. The officers concluded their visit by issuing a formal incident report for property damage and domestic disturbance. They warned Dad that repeated calls could lead to charges regardless of family ties, and recommended cooling off and professional mediation. They handed him a copy of the report and advised everyone to keep interactions peaceful. As the police car pulled away, Mom and the lawyer finally stepped inside. The lawyer introduced herself as Rebecca Hart, speaking directly to Dad and my stepmom in the entryway. She explained she was here on my mom's behalf to address concerns raised by recent events, including potential unauthorized decisions affecting my education and residence. Dad looked caught off guard by the timing, but Rebecca pressed forward, requesting access to all records related to any planned school transfers or relocations discussed in the last 24 hours. She cited the police report and the recorded evidence of coercion as grounds for immediate transparency. My stepmom attempted to dismiss it as overblown, suggesting they could talk privately without legal involvement, but Rebecca stood firm. She outlined that attempts to alter a minor's custody or schooling without proper consent could have serious consequences, especially alongside documented property damage and threats. Dad exchanged a long look with my stepmom before leading Rebecca to his office. He returned with the folder containing the boarding school materials, the application packet correspondence with the academy, and the bank transfer confirmation. Rebecca took a seat at the dining table, spreading everything out systematically. Mom sat next to me on the couch, squeezing my hand occasionally as Rebecca worked. The lawyer examined each document carefully, noting dates, amounts, and signature lines. She asked pointed questions about the timeline, who initiated contact with the school, and why my mom's approval hadn't been sought yet. The mood in the house changed palpably. Dad's defensiveness grew with every page turn. My stepmom kept interjecting explanations that Rebecca calmly redirected. Knox lingered on the stairs watching but staying out of it. Rebecca finished her initial review and addressed them both. These documents, combined with the audio evidence and tonight's police involvement, paint a clear picture of unilateral planning that bypasses legal requirements. She stated copies would be made and further steps taken to protect my interests. For the first time since everything started, the control they'd assumed slipped visibly away. Rebecca took the folder from Dad and carried it to the dining table in the connected living room, laying out the documents one by one under the bright overhead light. Mom remained seated beside me on the couch, her grip on my hand firm as Rebecca began her examination with measured precision. She opened with the main enrollment contract for the out-of-state boarding academy, highlighting the clauses that explicitly required signatures from both legal guardians for any minor relocating for education. Next, she slid the bank statement across the table, the one showing the $15,000 wire transfer marked as a non-refundable deposit, and asked Dad to verify the date and purpose. He confirmed it quietly, his voice lower than it had been the night before. Rebecca then focused on the parental consent page. Dad's signature was bold and clear in the first slot. The second slot, reserved for my mom, bore a handwritten name that mimicked Danielle's style, but showed inconsistencies in the slant and spacing. Rebecca inquired whether Dad had received explicit permission from my mom before adding that signature. Dad responded that the forms weren't finalized or submitted, yet just held in preparation for potential agreement down the line. My stepmom added quickly that they intended to present the opportunity to me properly once I understood the advantages. Rebecca noted the discrepancies without comment, moving on to the attached emails from the academy, acknowledging receipt of funds and reserving a spot pending completion. She questioned the origin of the inquiry, who first contacted the school, and why. My stepmom paused, glancing at Dad, then acknowledged that she had started the research after noticing ongoing tension in the house. She framed it as concern for family balance. Knox had been lingering near the hallway entrance, close enough to hear everything, but not fully in the room. As Rebecca's questions grew more direct, his restlessness showed. He shifted weight, clenched his jaw. When she asked about expected benefits for the household, Knox finally snapped. He stepped forward and let it spill. When she's out of here, the big room is mine completely. I can move my desk against the window, hook up the full surround sound for gaming all night if I want, cover the walls with my posters without anyone saying it's too much, and actually have space to hang out with friends instead of cramming into that tiny box down the hall. Dad immediately hissed his name to stop him, but Knox kept going for a second, shoulders squared like he'd held it in too long. The words landed hard, stripping away any pretense that this was about my development. Rebecca turned her attention to him, briefly asking if he realized the permanent nature of sending me away. Knox muttered that it would level things out, make the house less stressful for him. My stepmom reached to guide him back, her face tightening as she realized the outburst had shifted the tone. Rebecca returned to my stepmom. Was the primary motivation to create a more comfortable environment specifically for your son? After a heavy silence, my stepmom conceded. Yes, the suggestion began with her. She'd observed Knox struggling to adjust after moving in, feeling constantly outshone and constrained. She believed placing me in an elite boarding program would eliminate the daily reminders of my cheerleading successes, allowing Knox to find confidence without that shadow. Dad attempted to share responsibility, claiming it evolved into a mutual decision for overall family improvement, but Rebecca pressed him on whether my mom had been included at any stage. His lack of response spoke volumes. I remained completely silent throughout, seated still on the couch, taking in every shift, Dad's increasing pallor as details emerged. My stepmom's defensive posture stiffening with each admission, Knox's initial bravado fading into awkward avoidance once he registered the impact of his words. Mom's steady breathing next to me anchored everything as Rebecca continued documenting. Rebecca requested clarification on fallback plans if consent was withheld. Dad spoke of hoping discussion would sway opinions. My stepmom mentioned believing the program's reputation would eventually win approval. Each answer reinforced the pattern of exclusion. When Rebecca completed her review, the organized stack in front of her carried undeniable weight. She informed them that forging guardian consent and planning interstate relocation of a minor without agreement constituted serious violations, especially paired with the prior night's incident. Knox retreated fully to the stairs. Dad sank into a chair, exhaustion evident. My stepmom stared at the table, surface composure fraying. Rebecca closed the folder with finality and looked toward Mom. This provides a solid foundation moving forward. 10 days later, the emergency custody hearing took place in a small courtroom at the Mecklenburg County Family Court Building. Mom and I arrived early with Rebecca Hart sitting on one side of the aisle, while Dad, my stepmom, and Knox filed in on the other. Dad wore a suit that looked uncomfortable on him, avoiding eye contact as he passed. Knox slouched in his seat, staring at the floor. The judge, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses perched on her nose, called the case quickly. Rebecca stood first, presenting our petition for immediate change in primary custody based on evidence of an unsafe environment and attempted unauthorized relocation. She started by playing the full audio recording from that night. The courtroom speakers filled with Dad's raised voice demanding the room, my stepmom's threats, and their detailed discussion of the boarding school plan, including the deposit and signature issues. The judge listened without interruption, her expression neutral but attentive. Next, Rebecca submitted the police report from the disturbance call, complete with photos of the damaged door and wall cracks. She connected it directly to the timing of the confrontation, arguing it demonstrated escalation and intimidation. Then came the school documents, the application with the questionable signature, the payment proof, and emails confirming intent to enroll without both parents' consent. Rebecca explained how this amounted to planning forgery and interstate relocation of a minor in violation of existing custody terms. Dad's lawyer tried to argue that everything was exploratory, no forms submitted, and the door incident was a regrettable mistake under stress. He claimed the boarding school was genuinely for my athletic advancement, not displacement. The judge asked Rebecca for rebuttal. Rebecca called attention to the timeline deposit paid months earlier, coinciding with increased household tension, and no attempt to include my mom until forced. She emphasized the recording's clear admissions of prioritizing Knox's comfort over my stability. The judge then questioned Dad directly from the bench. He stumbled through answers, admitting the signature was added without permission, but insisting it was precautionary. When pressed on why my mom's input wasn't sought earlier, he had no strong response. My stepmom was called to testify. She maintained the plan was well-intentioned for family harmony, but under cross-examination from Rebecca, she acknowledged initiating the search because Knox felt overshadowed by my cheer schedule and awards. The judge noted that addressing one child's self-esteem by removing another from the home raised serious concerns. Knox was questioned briefly. He downplayed his role, saying he just wanted more space. The judge reminded him the issue was adult decisions affecting a minor's welfare. After a short recess to review evidence, the judge returned with her ruling. She stated the audio provided undeniable proof of coercion and manipulative intent. Combined with the property damage report and forged signature attempt, it established an unstable and potentially emotionally abusive environment. The recording, she said, was decisive, capturing admissions that could not be explained away as misunderstanding. She granted my mom primary physical and legal custody, effective immediately, citing the need to protect me from further manipulation and instability. For Dad, visitation was restricted to supervised only for the next 6 months, with mandatory completion of parenting classes and individual therapy focused on blended family dynamics and boundary respect. Any modification would require proof of progress. Additionally, a temporary no-contact order was issued for Knox regarding me to prevent potential retaliation or conflict until the situation stabilized. The gavel came down firmly. Dad sat motionless, face drained of color. My stepmom whispered something urgent to their lawyer. Knox looked up sharply, then away. Rebecca gathered her materials calmly while Mom turned to me with quiet relief in her eyes. The judge advised filing for retrieval of remaining belongings through proper channels if needed. As the courtroom emptied, I stood up without looking back at the other side. Mom and Rebecca flanked me as we walked out into the hallway. Dad called my name once softly from behind, but I kept moving forward. That same afternoon, we returned to the house one final time with an escort arranged through Rebecca to collect essentials. I packed clothes, cheer gear, medals, and personal items into suitcases while Mom helped sort. Dad watched from the doorway but stayed silent per the new restrictions already in motion. My stepmom busied herself in another room. Knox wasn't around. The house felt strangely empty despite being full of stuff. When the last box was loaded into Mom's car, I walked out the front door without turning around. We drove away from Charlotte that day and headed straight to the town where Mom had been living. The ride was mostly quiet, just the hum of the highway, and occasional check-ins from Mom asking if I needed anything. By evening, we pulled up to Aunt Mildred's house, a cozy 2-story place with a big porch and plenty of guest space. Aunt Mildred greeted us at the door with a tight hug and no questions, just, "You're home now." She'd cleared out the spare bedroom upstairs for me, complete with fresh sheets and extra pillows. Mom and I unpacked the essentials from the car: clothes, my cheer bag, a few medals I'd grabbed in the rush. Aunt Mildred made simple dinner pasta and salad. Nothing fancy, but it felt normal in a way I hadn't in months. That first night was rough. The bed was comfortable, the room quiet, but every small creak or car passing outside made me tense up, expecting another door to come crashing in. I lay awake for hours staring at the ceiling, replaying flashes of arguments and threats. Sleep came in short bursts, and when morning arrived, I felt drained, but determined not to show it. The next few weeks followed a similar pattern while Mom sorted permanent housing details. Aunt Mildred's place became a soft landing, mornings with coffee on the porch, evenings watching old shows together. She never pushed for details, just offered steady company and home-cooked meals. Mom spent days handling paperwork and school transfer logistics, making sure everything transitioned smoothly. Gradually, the nights got easier. The jumpiness faded as routines set in, no sudden demands, no walking on eggshells. I started sleeping through until morning, waking without that tight knot in my stomach. School transfer happened faster than expected. Mom enrolled me in the local high school, and the guidance counselor fast-tracked my record so I wouldn't fall behind junior year. Walking into the new building felt strange at first. Different hallways, unfamiliar faces, but the cheer coach heard about my background and invited me to tryouts right away. I showed up to practice nervous but ready. The team was solid, competitive at state level, and they needed someone with varsity experience. After running through routines and stunts, the coach pulled me aside and offered a spot on the squad. Being back on the mat, flipping and tumbling with a group that focused on skill instead of drama, pulled me out of my head. Training sessions became my anchor. Early mornings and after-school practices filled the days with structure and exhaustion, the good kind that left no room for overthinking. Teammates were welcoming, asking about my old routines without prying into why I'd switched schools. We bonded over drills, pyramid builds, and competition prep. My first meet with the new team came a month in. We placed high, and I contributed to a clean basket toss sequence that scored big. Bringing home another medal felt different this time. No side-eye glances, no comments about how it affected anyone else. Just congratulations and team pride. Friendships formed naturally through the squad. A couple girls invited me to grab food after practice, sharing stories about their own family stuff without making mine the center. Presley, one of the flyers, became my closest connection. We synced well on stunts and started hanging out outside school. As months passed, the wins kept coming. Regionals, then state qualifiers. Each trophy went on a shelf in my new room at Mom's apartment once we moved from Aunt Mildred's. No one at home resented the space they took, or the time I spent training. Mom came to every competition, cheering loudest from the stands. Through it all, I made the choice early and stuck to it: complete no contact with Andrew, Holly, and Knox. I blocked their numbers, social accounts, everything. When messages tried coming through from unknown numbers or mutual contacts, I deleted without reading. Mom supported it fully, routing any necessary communication through legal channels only. Life settled into something stable, and mine. Cheer kept building my confidence, school grades stayed strong, and the constant underlying tension I'd lived with for so long finally lifted. 1 year after leaving Charlotte, everything felt solidly in place. Senior year flew by in a blur of focused classes and intense cheer practices. I pushed my grades higher than ever, taking extra credits online to finish requirements ahead of schedule. Graduation came early for me, walking across the stage in spring instead of waiting for summer. The hard work paid off bigger than I expected. Scouts from several universities had started showing up at competitions after my transfer. My performances with the new team, clean stunts, strong tumbling passes, leadership in routines, caught attention. Offers rolled in, but one stood out: a full-ride cheerleading scholarship to a major program 3 states away. It covered tuition, housing, meals, everything. Mom cried when I told her. We signed the acceptance letter together that same week. College life started smooth. The campus team was elite, practices demanding but rewarding. I earned a starting spot as a base early on, traveling for nationals and bringing back more hardware. Classes challenged me without overwhelming, and for the first time my schedule was mine to own. No explanations needed, no guilt about time spent training. Days filled with lectures, weight sessions, choreography, and study groups. Nights were for recovery and hanging with teammates who shared the same drive. Stability wrapped around everything like a safety net I'd never had before. Freedom to plan my future without interference felt like breathing clean air after years in a stuffy room. News about the other side trickled in through distant channels, nothing direct since I'd kept the no-contact wall solid. Mom heard updates occasionally through old mutual contacts or legal filings. Andrew and Holly separated within months of the ruling. The lost deposit hit their savings hard, combined with lawyer fees on both sides and ongoing court costs. Finances crumbled fast. They downsized from the Charlotte house to separate rentals. Arguments over money turned constant blame, shifting back and forth until staying together wasn't worth it anymore. Andrew struggled most visibly. Stress ate at him, lost weight, missed shifts at work. The extra overtime he'd relied on dried up when focus slipped, and performance reviews suffered. He scaled back hours just to manage day-to-day, falling into a routine that barely covered basics. Knox faced his own fallout at school. Behavior issues escalated, skipping classes, clashes with teachers, fights in the halls. Suspensions piled up, multiple incidents leading to mandatory counseling ordered by the district. Therapy sessions became required attendance, but progress reports showed resistance more than change. Grades tanked, extracurriculars dropped, social circle shrank. The consequences chained together naturally from choices made that night and the months before. No single dramatic collapse, just steady erosion from prioritizing comfort over fairness, secrets over honesty. I followed none of it closely. Blocked paths stayed blocked. No curiosity pulled me to unblock numbers or search names. Mom respected the boundary completely, only sharing if something legal required attention. Looking back from my dorm room overlooking the new campus, surrounded by teammates who valued effort the same way I did, everything aligned. Trophies on the shelf represented wins earned in an environment that celebrated them, not resented them. I didn't lose a family. I just left a place that never treated me like one.